the title's really kind of, I was trying to think of a title that, I've used so many in these pieces mathematically, and I was trying to think of a title that sort of sums it all up all together. I've been using math in my titles from the beginning of this series, even when it was on panels or smaller panels and on canvas, and which originated to the idea of like where math comes from. Math comes from the age of Babylon in the Middle East, and algebra was created in that part of the world, the part of the world my parents are from. And so it was sort of my way to remind people, Arab contributions to the world. Whenever people, all my life when people talk about Arabs and Middle Easterners, they always have this view of saying how backwards or barbaric or Stone Age the society is, when that's not true, obviously. It was that part of the world contributions which leads to so much of what the world has gained. When I start off, I think whenever I start off a series of works, I think of it like, I think of things in like an album format, musically. Being a kid, I was obviously, our lives revolved around music and things that inspired us. And, I was a big, from the beginning as a kid, I was a big Beatles fan, or Radiohead, and all these artists that would make an album a statement. And I think I thought about my work in that same way, like the idea of every piece of a series being a song, making like a full album in a way. And I think when I started those canvas pieces, it was sort of my way of making an album about the people, about the refugees, about the people, the collateral damage of war and what was going on. I had an understanding that they just weren't thought about. They were being talked about for political gain in the media, and used as scare tactics and not as people. And in the work, I was trying to create what I probably saw at the time as an album trying to change that narrative. I can't sing, I can't play any instruments, but I can paint, and I can use colors, and I can use these beautiful designs and mosaics from the culture, and floral patterns from the culture to sort of change your view of who these people are, and maybe have you identify with what they're going through. It was always sort of my hope that you would see your family or your mother, your father, your child in those figures. I was always just trying to grow a better understanding for the viewer of these people that were being dismissed. I think what I was trying to do with the figures is sort of enhance their environment for a better understanding from the viewer. I think if you were to see, if you were to see refugees traveling, to a better home, better environment, a better country to take shelter. A lot of people in this country or other countries might say, we're closed here, we don't want you. But if I were to show you what is going on in their homes, and why they had to leave, that might change your view and how you see these children, these mothers, these fathers, and what led them to making that choice to take that long journey and to put themselves up against your rejection. I feel like I've gone in through so many different waves from the start of these series. I'm not even sure anymore of how I thought when I first started. I wanted to bring the designs and the patterns originally just to sort of change the idea that all the beautiful things that come from the Arab world, that come from Syria, that come from Iraq, that come from these Middle Eastern countries. Originally I was using these designs that are called Zalige designs, and there are these mosaic patterns that you'd find on instruments and jewelry boxes and games like chess and backgammon and all sorts of other places, like in buildings and stuff, furniture. That was what I was first trying to represent in my work, and trying to make my audience and make people aware of this beautiful artwork that is created in that part of the world. I remember when I was in Syria and I would see them, and as a young art student at that time, I was blown away by it. I was blown away by the intricacies of it. And I think I knew I was going to use it eventually in my work, but at that time, being young, I just had no reason to. And it wasn't until the destruction of my mother's homes, her country, and the city that she was raised in, and that I spent time in as a kid in Aleppo. It wasn't until then where I had a reason to use those designs. And I think eventually the way I sort of used it was to use it as a form of structural. I think what I ended up doing is I started to use it as a cultural structure to uphold what was being destroyed. So the idea that we don't have the homes that we had, we don't have the life that we had, but we know who we are as a people, as a unit, as a community, as a culture. Let me say this. I do believe that at times at making these and showing these designs and recreating these designs, I do think I have somewhat of a selfish intention in this being my attempt to regain my cultural identity that I've lost through the years in being in this country. I lived in this country for years where we were told as children not to tell people that we were Middle Eastern, that my dad was Iraqi, that we come from that part of the world, because we would things would be said, and we'd be bullied or this or that. And so I grew up at a time where we would have to, my sisters and I, we really worked hard to fit in. I'm making these designs to tell the story and make people aware of what's going on in that part of the country, and to grow in understanding. But it's also, probably in all honesty, a last ditch effort for myself to stay true to where my mom comes from, where I come from, where I spend time from, what is my culture. I've always known as a kid that my sisters and I weren't like the other people that we went to school with. And this is sort of my attempt to, where I was running away from it probably when I was younger, I'm embracing it more so. And as a person who has grown up children, I look back and I could have done a better job in raising them in a certain way of being aware of where we come from, where their grandmother comes from, what makes us different from other families, So, I often think of like the way I went through the work was not only sort of reminding myself that these people were my neighbors at one point. These people were people that were my friends of my mom, or friends of my, they were my cousins, my family that lived there, not even that long ago. But it's also like a selfish attempt for me to stay true to where I come from. And is that selfish? To point, but I like to think I'm using it in the right way. The first piece I made in this series, Subtract, Shelter, Add Wolves, that's actually the oldest piece that I started at around 8 to 9 years ago. At that time, I was sharing a studio with my friend Andre, and I was getting all these Zalige design pieces that were being shipped to me from Syria during the war, at the height of the war. And I was using them in my work when it came to like encaustic paint, stuff that I was kind of dabbling in earlier. But with this piece, I was sort of, in my head, I wanted to, I really wanted to create like a whole full foreground of just the designs. And I was looking to use the real, actual mosaic Zalige designs. But at that time, because of what was going on, it got even more dangerous, and he could only send me very little. And at that time, I was very frustrated with it because it just would not. I had all these ideas of kind of what you see now, but I had all these ideas with the real original designs. And I was frustrated because I just knew that I couldn't move forward. And my studio mate, Andre, at the time, would kind of push me and tell me just to create them myself. And I was never that type of painter. I was never certainly like a really delicate or detailed type of painter. I really like to use thick brush strokes, heavy on the paint and the texture, very sort of rhythmic in, application, gesturally. Um, but so I had no want to be detailed in my work, and if I were to recreate those designs, I would have to be. And so, with that being his suggestion, I dismissed it for a very long time, and but I grew aimless in the studio, not knowing how to move forward. And my studio mate would keep pushing that idea on me. And then eventually I sort of, threw my arms up in the air and I said, okay, I'll give it a shot. And, my first couple attempts, were kind of, rough, but good enough to keep moving forward. And each one got a little bit tighter, to the point where I really started to be convincing and replicating the designs myself. But in all that time, the piece that I started off with, that I kind of just threw it to the side, because I was moving in a different direction in the work. I've already painted the buildings, but they did not have the design on it. And so it was sort of laying by the wayside in my studio for years. And it wasn't until the pandemic, it's sometime, I believe, over the summer in 2020, where I was taking a nap on my couch, and I saw the piece sticking out. And I was trying to close my eyes, but I kept looking at that piece and thinking to myself, well, now that I've sort of built this language for myself and using these designs and being as detailed as I've gotten, I was kind of curious to see if I could take that piece, put it back on the easel, and make it work with the designs that I've sort of come to kind of perfect. But the difference is that this time I was going to try to use more well-known Arabic designs, which is more the Moroccan look of designs. And so I did that piece, and it really turned out very well. And I thought, well, this works. I wonder what happens if I keep moving forward. And as I did that, the designs got tighter. But what was strange is the painting got tighter. The painting of the buildings got tighter. Where I was no longer painting the way that I painted, basically my whole life at that point, with oils, being loose, being more about the brush stroke showing, engaging with the format of the structure. I was starting to, with each piece, I was starting to get more detailed, which was sort of my way of trying to get people to have an understanding of what it was to walk inside of that space, so it wouldn't look as abstracted, for them to see the realism of that destruction. And to see that over so many paintings, it's pretty eye-opening for me as a painter, to see how what it looked like in the start to the approach I took somewhere in the middle to the approach at the end, where it is as detailed as it got.